grew by a weaker than expected 0.3% in the first quarter. That's the latest. I'm Victoria Lawrence.
The views and opinions expressed in this show are not necessarily held by Iman FM. We encourage the listeners to use their wisdom and knowledge to make their own observations and conclusions. Please continue to listen and support your community radio Iman on 103.1 FM.
The world is changed. I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth.
What were we and what have we become?
How are Muslims behaving?
What happened to education?
How do we integrate? All these and many more. Real problems, real situations. Join Amr and Iqbal for Real Talk every Friday 10 p.m. on Iman 103.1 FM.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. You're listening to Real Talk on Iman FM 103.1 FM. I'm your host Iqbal, and in the studio I've got, mashallah, got three brothers here. Brother Hashimi and Mansoor as usual guest, and also got brother Shabir. Assalamu alaikum brothers.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
And to our listeners in Sheffield, Rotherham, Nottingham, Luton, or anywhere else you're listening, even if you're listening Mars or Jupiter, whatever, if Mars is from wherever, then salam to everyone as well. Hope everyone's doing well. And we've come to a month of Shaban now, so the clock is ticking now. It's 30 days countdown now, or 29 days, depending on the mood of the moon, shall we say. Inshallah, studio hotline is 0142425 that's Sheffield 2425 WhatsApp number is 07885559986 07885559986. And if you're listening to the program online, TuneIn app, or on Facebook or YouTube as well, I think it's broadcast live on YouTube as well. There's so many ways things are getting broadcast. There's nowhere to hide, basically. I think, once you go on social medias, anything digital, there's nowhere to hide. So salam to all, and feel free to give a shout, buzz, whatever, text, Instagram, I don't know, whatever, just we are more than happy to receive any kind of comments, thoughts, or feedback. Inshallah, tonight's topic we're going to be discussing is I think it's an important topic. I think especially for some of us in the studio here as well. Maybe not all, but some, I think. For the time being, anyway. The topic we'll be discussing tonight is common problems in marriage, and we're going to be looking at some solutions. So I think straight away, marriage is a subject that, I don't know, it just either makes everyone, puts a smile on your face, or just makes you lowers your eyes and just, I don't know, disheartens you. So Brother Shabir, how you been?
Alhamdulillah. Puts a smile to my face.
Oh, that's what I like to hear. That's good, mashallah. And Brother Mans, I could see you smiling, so
Jazakallah khair. No comment yet.
Okay, that's good. And Brother Hashimi, I know I could see that, the excitement, the anticipation there.
Inshallah, what can I say? Inshallah.
That's good, mashallah. To our listeners out there, if you've been, this is something, marriage is, you have your ups and downs in marriages, I think, and that's common factor, basically. I don't think anybody can say that they're having a marriage where it's very blissful or they don't have any issues or problems. The question lies in is how you deal with it, or how you what kind of solution you look for, basically. And I think that's something that it comes through knowledge, it comes through experience, it comes through asking people, through observation and various other means, basically. And problems can be very minute, can turn into disaster at times, and sometimes problems can be huge, but can be solved very amicably without any kind of hurting of emotions from either party. And that's something, like I said, right, so hopefully, our guests here, they're going to be sharing their experience and their thoughts and comments. And to our listeners as well, if you'd like to give your thoughts or comments, or if you got any questions, then you are more than welcome to call in or send a text, or even post a message on Facebook or Twitter, I think. I think I mean, the thing, what with marriage, from what I've seen, Brother Shabir, I don't know, what's your thought? And Mansoor as well, and Hashim, I think with this, with the in the 21st, with this in this day and age, I think the problems that are sort of occurring are different to maybe what we're used to, what we heard, kind of thing. Sometimes even what we sort of studied in madrasa or what we read, kind of thing. Do you think that's...
Yeah, first of all, I mean, there's a saying, isn't it, that marriage is an institution, and marriage is, as an institution, has been around, as long as, civilized man has been around. And like most institutions, eventually you're going to get problems in that institution. So like any organization or relationship that you have with people, marriage is no different in that sense, that you're going to have problems. The fact that in marriage the problems tend to be focused is because it's such an intimate relationship. It's like no other relationship in the physical world. You can talk about love for God and love for Allah, but in terms of intimacy and relationship, marriage is probably one of the most intense. So inevitably in that kind of relationship you're going to have issues, problems, and if you want that institution, the marriage to continue, you have to find ways of working out those problems. So hopefully we can talk about some of the solutions, some of the problems and some of the solutions to those problems, inshallah.
I think it's interesting what you said there, because I think marriage is something, it depends. I mean, sometimes it's how people perceive that to be, in terms of, do they see it as a sacred sort of like a bond that you work and you try your utmost to preserve or keep, basically. And obviously if you don't see it in that sense, then sometimes even trivial things can lead to separation, basically.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah, that's the thing. What I was going to say, if there's undertones,
and
there's power struggle going on in the undertones, that can be a major problem. That.
And the other thing is, I think before we start, I mean, one of the things like scholars mentioned, and it's something worth pondering as well, is like, sometimes you have this two extreme where you find that people are very flippant to when it comes to marriages, in terms of breakdown of marriages. Over small things, they tend to they might try to sort of separate or get divorced or whatever kind of thing. And the other is sometimes people are very scared, or things that hold them back, where they might be having a miserable or problem in the marriage, where the best solution might be through divorce, and because of stigma and various other things, that they feel they can't take that approach. So those two things, if and when necessary, I think it should be done in the correct sort of manner, basically. One shouldn't feel that they have to stick to marriage because of honor and shame and stuff like that, because you find in Islam, that shouldn't be the case, basically. If that is the path that you want to take. And the other is, you shouldn't treat sort of marriage in a very trivial thing as well. And that's, I think you see that more and more nowadays, from what I've seen, kind of thing. So that's,
Yeah, and I think we have to look at in the context that we're living in as well. Commitment is even in relationship where there is no commitment, such as marriage, friendships, work relationships. You find a lot of these in the context that we live in are very fragile nowadays, and I think marriage is just another one of those relationships, and that's why we see a lot of breakdown in marriage. And it's not just religious, not Muslim marriages, it's across the board, whether they're secular or Muslim or religious marriages. They're all kind of breaking down in very similar patterns. So we have to ask ourselves, what is it that's causing those things in today's context for marriage to break down so quickly in a lot of circumstances?
I think, do you think that, I don't know what you guys do you think marriage falls down because a person loses sort of love for that person? And if that is the case, I want a definition of
what's love.
What is love? The famous question that Hadawi asked.
love is different to everybody else.
Yeah.
Love's just a word. It's what it represents. So you can have love for anything. Like me personally, you know some of mine already, but you know with other people, they can love and have that happy feeling for different things. So I think the term love is used too widely universally. It's the foundation and building blocks, what makes up the love that's important.
Brother Shabir?
Yeah, I mean, he's right. I mean, you can love things. I mean, I love my iPad. It's not the same as love in a relationship. So it's, like I said, the context is different, and you know how you know people. If you ask people to define love, they'll find it very difficult to define.
That's right, because it means different thing to everybody.
People have different definitions for love. Everybody's an individual, and the way they perceive they love something, it's going to be very different for different people.
Why do we get married though? You know, if you think of the fundamental why we get married, it's to advance the ummah, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, actually, I mean, from a fiqh point of view, from what I've studied and what the Shaykh mentioned, I think Imam Ghazali mentioned it as well. I mean, it's quite interesting what you mentioned, that the purpose of marriage is for procreation.
That's it.
And, you know, as you mentioned, the hadiths are backed up as well, you know, the famous hadiths. But yeah, if you look at, in this day and age, most people, I think they tend to, especially those who sort of arrange, those who sort of choose or pick their own spouse, I think it's more based on love or attraction or something like that, in that line, isn't it?
Yeah.
Love or satisfying one's needs.
Yeah, and so it was, you know, as you mentioned, like if marriage is meant to be based for the purpose of procreation, then where does love come into that equation kind of thing? Is it before, during, or after kind of thing? That emotional attachment. So, you know, for the sake of argument, let's just sort of define love within ourselves that we're talking about. It's that sort of it's an affection towards someone where you are sort of happy with them, where you feel content with them kind of thing, where you are happy, I don't know, eager to see that person, or you miss them, whatever, you know.
A warm feeling of comfort.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I mean, I was just kind of having a quick read, and there's a whole industry now around love, marriage, and relationships. You go to Amazon or any other bookshop, and you can find hundreds of books, whether they're Christian, secular, Muslim, on marriage and relationships. And one interesting book that's used quite a lot by, I've noticed even by Muslim scholars, is one called The Languages of Love. And we were talking about definition of love. It actually tries to define love in terms of languages. It's not actually languages, but it's kind of the chap who's written the book, called Gary Chapman. He's kind of listed 5 things which he identifies as the languages of love, which if addressed by both spouses, then it leads to a happier, longer marriage, apparently. So, and I've noticed when I go to a lot of the seminars by scholars, they kind of use the same theme again and again to kind of define love and relationship. So,
I mean, coming back to the topic, into some of the common problems that, you know, that face marriages nowadays, what do you think are some of them, you know? Or what have you seen, or
problems?
Yeah.
I personally feel, I think society as a whole has changed. A brother touched upon it earlier. If you look at relationships in general, they become very fragile. It's not just marriage. If you talk about friendships, even you know, brother-sister relationships, family relationships, they all have become extremely fragile. And the way they used to work in the past, it doesn't happen like that. Even extended families, that unit is fractured. It doesn't work. The whole social dynamic system has changed.
Love's become a kind of dilute form of what it used to be, and exactly what the brother's saying about how people have become really sensitive, and things make a big impact.
Why do you think that is? You know, it's because, I mean, it might be a silly question, I don't know,
The world has
I'm
become. I personally feel the world at the moment has become more materialistic.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a throwaway culture.
Yeah.
And people are never satisfied. There's always the thinking around the corner is somebody better.
Yeah, man, wouldn't you say, like, in terms of materialistic wise, it was there in the past as well, kind of thing? You know, I mean, obviously, in terms of what we desire, what we want, was based on what was available at that time.
I agree.
But the desire and the and the feeling of accruing, basically.
I wouldn't agree with that, because I think in the past, if people were more simplistic.
Mm.
Now people have become a lot more complicated, and their heads are filled with all sorts of junk and things. I mean, people had they had a direction.
Yeah.
They had a very simple life, and now people's lives are extremely complicated. They're never happy in the workplace. They're not happy. They're always wanting more. They're not content, and in a relationship, they're not happy in there as well. I mean, if they just keep looking, and what about this person? So this is one of the reasons I feel it can lead to divorce, because people are always looking, and they're looking for excuses.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at you're talking 1940s, 1950s marriages in the West, in the UK, the USA, for example, roles were, like you say, very defined.
Yeah.
So the husband, he would go out to work. He was a breadwinner. Yeah. The wife, she was at home. She was, either looking after the house or looking after the children. So roles were very defined, and people knew what role they were carrying out. What they even, they would know that at some point they're going to have a mortgage, buy a house, settle down, have 2.4 children, and that was it. That was life. I think that's what's changed now, is that uniformity, that that desire for it to be kind of consistent in something has changed. People have just, and even in marriages now, people within a year, people already becoming happy and thinking of perhaps other relationships. Muslims are thinking perhaps another wife had solved the problems in a marriage, those kind of things. So people are thinking in a very, I don't know how to define it, but in a different way than it was more simplistic in the past, I think.
Do you think the breakdown in marriage, or the fallout, or even the reason from amongst the spouses, where does the most blame lies with, or who is the one tends to sort of go towards the separation part kind of thing? Is there like a general pattern, or is it like, it's hard to tell? I don't know, because I'm just thinking, because I as probably men, most of us here, we probably we probably get the perspective on the men's side kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We could do with a sister's opinion on this. If any of the sisters like to text in or phone up, that'd be very good.
Definitely, you'll hear different. But just from my own perspective, I've been married, alhamdulillah, for about 27 years now, and I can tell you that there is really no one particular person to blame in problems in marriage. It's really, most times, both people. So sometimes it could be initiated by one person, or the problems could begin with one incident in a relationship, but it's how that is now dealt with by both spouses which defines whether that relationship continues or ends, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it might be a small disagreement, but it can snowball out of control.
It can blow out all proportion.
All right. Yeah. I mean, one of the key things is in terms of common sort of issues. I think what we're facing nowadays, probably, I think from what I've seen from some people, is to sort of communications. I think is the key thing that you find. Either lack of communications or miscommunications, however way you want to define it, depending on what the circumstances is. And it's quite interesting because I remember a couple of years ago, I think I attended this seminar by Imam Zayd Shakir, and it was entitled 7 Secrets to a Happy Marriage. And he sort of he went through that sort of couple of he gave like 7 things that you should work on, and one of them was actually communicate kind of thing. And that's something that you find that what's it called, when I talk to some people, friends I have sometime, or relatives or something like that, you find that sometimes the breakdown of the fallout happens because of within the communication there's something not made clear kind of thing, or misunderstanding or something like that, which is a bit sad kind of thing.
Yeah, And like I said, this chap who defines the 5 languages love, he mentions communication as well, but he calls it the words of affirmation. He uses different terminology. Words of affirmation. So what he's talking about is when you have a conversation between spouses, the kind of wording you use in your language matters a lot. So for example, if I as a husband say to my wife, get me a cup of tea, you say in a kind of a negative, direct way, will have an effect on the perception of the wife, of the spouse, of the wife. But if I say in a kinder way, say, please can you get me a cup of tea, or use words like love or honey, it can make a massive difference in terms of the kind of effect it has on a relationship. And women, and there's also differences. He talks about difference between what women like to hear, what men like to hear. So women like to hear words like I love you, an affirmation of love, whereas men are not really into their wives telling them I love you. Men are more into, for them, respect is more important. So they perhaps don't like a wife that's nagging too much. So instead of saying to a husband, do this, do that, if he says, could you please do this when you've got time, that's much more effective as communication in terms of getting things done than nagging the husband to do something where he's just going to react and he's not going to do it and probably lead to a fallout. So he talks, that comes under the broad definition of communication, the way you talk to each other.
I mean, it's interesting what you said, because from what I've seen speaking with youth and from school and even adults sometimes, the way we communicate is a lot of it is like a straight lingo kind of thing, and and a lot of the time vulgar or rough sort of speech, if you know what I mean. It's
Abrupt.
not, we can't. You find that the way sometimes you might talk with your friends who are you very close to, without feeling, without showing too much kind of courtesy or respect, and they tend to use that same type of words or same type of tone or whatever with if in a working environment or in an educational environment or in some professional environment, and vis-a-vis that at the same time, and that same type goes on with family sort of communication, with elders. And then obviously if you're married, then you mentioned like if you want a cup of tea and you say get me a tea or something like that, he might not be meaning in the context like he's giving an order, but because he's not refined, he's not accustomed to how one should talk to some people based on their sort of standing in society to them. He hasn't sort of done that, and that it's quite
and in certain cultures, for example, South Asian culture, it's almost seen as a good thing to order your wife about. You don't talk to your wife in a gentle, nice way.
I missed that first bit.
As in certain cultures, in the Indian subcontinent culture, for example, it's almost expected for you to talk to your wife in a very kind of direct, harsh way, as to order around.
I don't know. It's a type of stereotype that we have, perception we have, but
you disagree. You disagree.
I would disagree.
I wouldn't disagree, right? But what I would say is, in practice, is it common? You know what I mean? I'm just reflecting on it basically, because a lot of the time we might have a certain perception of how society perceives the other society, but in practice it might be slightly different. Because just trying to think, just generally speaking, trying to think of your uncles or grandparents or something like that. How do they talk to each other?
If I look at them and try not to be biased, they're very direct.
Are they?
They would never use words such as, I think there's a difference between maybe classes. There is a class difference in this, but in terms of working classes, they wouldn't use words like even the Asian equivalent of love or darling.
Yeah, that's true. That absolutely, I agree.
You wouldn't hear that kind of.
They don't use that. They don't use.
I mean, they find it very embarrassing to be using words like that.
Yeah, that's true. They wouldn't.
Especially in front of children.
Yeah, I'm talking about like giving instructions in like it's like an order basically. Not necessarily using sweet words to say like, oh, I don't know.
I think
I don't think that happened in that kind of generation.
Yeah, it did. But it's even like because we know even within the English culture, there's difference between the way working class people talk and middle class people talk. Working class tend to be much more direct. So it might be just a class thing rather than just like a stereotype.
Okay, we're going to continue with our discussion. I think it's hopefully is getting a bit interesting. But we're going to go to our first break. So we'll be back shortly after this.
This is your local community station, Iman FM on 103.1 FM.
नात क्या है निगहतों की सरजमी का तज़किरा नात क्या है सब हसीनों से हसी का तज़किरा प्रोग्राम नात क्या है जिसमें आदाब नात अदायगी नात और तलफ्फुज़ नात पर गुफ्तगू की जाएगी हर मंडे की शाम 8 बजे कारी मोहम्मद शहजाद के साथ सिर्फ ईमान एफएम पर
In a world where accident claims are poorly managed and the referral fees paid are so low, and just when all hope is lost in the city of Sheffield, a hero emerges. A hero so powerful, one phone number is all you need. A hero named Mr. Compensator. For your referral fee of £2,000, call Mr. Compensator now on 0114 3863 386. Terms and conditions apply.
ओ दोस्ता बनी ठणी तक किथे तैयारियां नी
मैं जुलियन और जुमेरा
दुबई जा रहे
नहीं जुमेरा स्पाइस रेस्टोरेंट
उथे क्या खास है
1976 दी देसी रवायती खाने जेड़े पाकिस्तान ने जाने माने शेफ बनाने ने खाई दा वतन नी याद अच्छा है लैम चाप्स चिकन बोटी लीवर टिक्का चिकन काबली मेन डिशां विच देसी स्टाइल हाउस स्पेशल कढ़ाइयां ते बाल्टी डिशां अच्छी तरह खाओ या डिलीवरी कराओ
जुमेरा स्पाइस रेस्टोरेंट 1 The Common Actresfield Sheffield S35 9WJ 01142 467 238
मैं जा रही हूँ द बाजार में
For a great happy shopping day, visit the bazaar. You will love the new bazaar.
जहाँ पर हर तरह के नए फैशन अच्छी कीमतों के साथ खुले हैं
Visit the bazaar at Syme Street, BD1 3RB, former Rawson Market.
Open every Saturday, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Also every Wednesday at Leeds Kirkgate Market.
The Bazaar, जहां आपको हर किस्म की चीज मिल सकती है.
The bazaar. Ooh yeah. मेरा नाम आयशा है और मेरा ताल्लुक कश्मीर ऑर्फन्स रिलीफ ट्रस्ट मीरपुर से है कोर्ट एजुकेशनल कॉम्प्लेक्स चरिकस मेरे ख्वाबों की जन्नत जहां बेहतरीन देखभाल आला तालीम बेपनाह प्यार और मेहरबान शफकत हम सबको हासिल है अब फेज 2 में 500 बच्चों और बच्चियों के लिए रिहायशगाहें बन रही हैं और इसके लिए 9 करोड़ रुपए चाहिए मुझे यकीन है आप मायूस नहीं करेंगे
कश्मीर ऑर्फन्स रिलीफ ट्रस्ट 0300 123 774 court.org.uk
Iman FM on air 24/7 365. We're ready to help you promote your business to your target market from airtime campaigns to program sponsorship, social media interaction to online campaigns that'll reach your customers quickly and effectively. Call us now on 0114 242 0551 or email info@imanfm.com and let's get things happening to your business with Iman FM.
ओ दोस्ता ओ मेरी स्पीडिंग टिकट है मैं क्या करा
तू खान सोलिसिटर्स की कॉल कर उना कोल स्पेशल टीम ही जेडी रोड ट्रैफिक केसेस रेड लाइटां नो इंश्योरेंस तो किनी के इमिग्रेशन फ्रॉड मनी लॉन्ड्रिंग पर्सनल इंजरी क्लेम्स सिविल लिटिगेशन तक कत्ल दे केस भी हल करने ने ते जे तुसा समझो कि पुलिस तुसे नाल कोई ज्यादती कीती है ते ओ कंपनसेशन भी दुआने ने ओ खान चढ़ा माड़ी जान
Khan Solicitors 351 Abbeydale Road Sheffield 0114 258 3399
Your voice, your choice. You're listening to Iman FM.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. You listen to Real Talk on Iman FM 103.1 FM. I'm your host Iqbal, and in the studio I got brother Hashimi and Mansoor, and also got brother Shabir as well. We're discussing the subject of some of the common problems that could occur in the marriages, and just looking at some of the solutions and ways to resolve these issues. And the studio hotline is 0114 2425 200. That's Sheffield 2425 200. Or you could send a WhatsApp message on 0788 559 786. That's 0788 559 786.
I think language is very important because I mean one of the things reading articles and stuff language makes a huge difference. I mean if you can say the same thing in one way but if you use a different tone it can come across totally different so this is one of the reasons I personally feel it can lead to a lot of problems is the kind of language that the people are using or one of the person uses and it can make the other person feel maybe offended and after a bit it can get too much and I think and lack of communication as well maybe you don't whatever is inside, you're not really putting them into words. You're not explaining things, and there can be misunderstandings. So I think for couples, they need to be more open and have these discussions rather than keeping them inside, and then all of a sudden, everything comes to an end.
I think it's because I think it's human nature. Like, we like to communicate, we like to talk. I think, and one of the key things, I think we said at the beginning of the show, there's in this day and age, the digital fact, the social media kind of thing is having a massive impact on people's level of understanding of communication as well, the way it's done nowadays.
The thing is, they are communicating. I mean, people are communicating across the world now.
Yeah.
So you could be sat here, you could be sat in Pakistan, you could be sat in New York, America, all over.
Yeah.
But the thing is, they are communicating using, using Facebook or sending messages via WhatsApp or Messenger.
Yeah.
But the thing is, when couples are together, are they actually communicating together with words, or they're just like one? I think. There is a lack of communication there as well, especially when it comes to feelings.
I think that's true, yeah.
People are not open. Sometimes they just keep hiding things inside, and then that just leads to misunderstandings, and it can lead to anything.
I think that's true, because I think one of the key things you mentioned, the social media thing is, even though the opportunity is there to communicate, but that kind of communication is more of a summary, or it's like a more in an articulate form of communication, because it gives you time to write what you want to sort of say, kind of thing. Whereas face-to-face communication is instantaneous. You don't have time to articulate, you don't have time to think. What comes out of you tends to be is who you are, kind of thing, how you use the word sometimes.
I mean, you can have if you look at social dynamics now, kids come from school.
Yeah.
They might have tea, and they take you upstairs to their bedroom, and they're on their phone or their laptop or whatever, communicating with their friends. And then you have, they might have a sibling and they're in another room, and the parents are downstairs. One's sat in one room, the other one sat in the other room. How well do they actually know each other? Is it like strangers just living in one home? So things have definitely changed. The whole social dynamics of relationships have changed. People, even though they live in the same home, that doesn't mean they actually know each other in the way that people used to know. Like previously, the bonding is there, where brothers used to bond with with each other, and sisters, and mom and dad. So the things have definitely changed. I think the whole relationship, bonding, everything has changed, and because there's new social media that's out there, new ways of communication.
I mean, you can be literally, you can have a family in one room, but they'll all be on their own phones, using social media. They'll be communicating across the globe, but not with each other. And you'll get two spouses, on their own, where there's a prime opportunity for them to communicate, but they'll be on their phones, communicating with whoever they're communicating. And they're missing like really vital opportunities for that communication. And that's a real sad thing. That it's quite ironic. You're on social media, your spouses are not be able to talk to each other because they're too busy on their own devices, kind of thing. And I think that's a growing problem now. And how do you solve it?
I think the other danger is worth thinking about, is because is the way the natural process of learning is through observation. Is you pick it up from your parents, kind of thing. Just generally speaking, kids pick up the habits and ways to communicate, and how to communicate, and what words to use to communicate from the parents. And if there is any shortcoming within that, as the parents, then your child is going to pick up that, and it's going to that cycle continues, kind of thing.
That tarbiyat, those formative years, they are key, and because later on in life, that is what defines you. When you were at home, and that that's the first level, your first madrasa is your home, your mother. So it makes a huge difference in later on, the way you communicate with your spouse or your friend or everybody else. So that, I think, I feel at this point in time people are neglecting because they seem to not have enough time. I mean, the father's out working and the mum could be quite busy as well, and she could be working as well, so the kids can get neglected. And they're picking up the ways to talk from their friends, and sometimes it's street lingo or watching videos or films, so the way of communication, I feel, has changed as well.
Or they learn to communicate from the tech, and that's a major problem.
I think, so that's communication is one of the key things. I mean, you mentioned children, so do you think children play a factor in creating problems between spouses? Brother Shabir, I know you mashallah, you've been blessed with a number of children.
That's what I was thinking. I think children crave for stability in families, in family life. That's my experience. And it's usually because there's a problem between spouses that children become affected, not the other way around. If you're talking about being affected, it's usually children that get affected by quarrelling between spouses and problems that are difficult you can't take them to a bedroom. When you have an argument, it tends to be in the living room or wherever it happens, and the children are witnessing it, and they're the ones that probably get most damaged through that kind of relationship.
So I think one of the key things to sort of ponder about, or just to be very wary of, in terms of sometimes what kind of communication takes place between spouses, i.e. especially if it's sort of heated argument or something like that, they should be done with wisdom, basically, or in a conscientious manner. And that's quite hard at times. It's very hard because, especially people who can't maintain and control their anger, they don't. And unfortunately nowadays, I think, if you go out in the high street and you see sometimes people arguing and talking and stuff like that, paying no sort of attention to who's around, basically. And sometimes when you hear things, you think, I wish I did not hear this, I wish I did not see this. You feel embarrassed at times, and as you mentioned, I think that's something worse.
You have to remember that when you do get angry in front of your children, it's like you said, behaviour is learned.
Yeah.
So more than likely that somebody within someone or one of your children is going to pick up on that and is also going to end up, having that kind of anger, whether it's just learned behaviour or whether they're just themselves, they're having problems in terms of dealing with things. They're also going to have anger problems. It's a cyclical thing.
Yeah, it changes a child's brain development if they witness anger from an early age, and it totally changes that direction of their behaviour for adult life.
Yeah.
It's how early influences can contribute to antisocial behaviour in later on in life.
I mean, those experiences or what you observe as a child, that is later on you take those things on, and those things actually define you as well. They form your personality and the way you think. So people can be molded with what they see as when they were children. So if the children are seeing all this negativity and this fighting and arguing, this will have an influence, and this could be a negative influence, and later on in life this will result in them having problems as well.
I mean, do you think? I mean, it's interesting because this is sort of obviously moving on the impact, the effect of couples arguing or something like that in front of their children, and we're not even going to what some of the arguments could be about, and if you like psychoanalyze of children in terms of, especially those who are tends to be antisocial or very aggressive or something like that. As you mentioned, they tend to pick up from what they've seen from their parents. And I don't think it makes a big difference as far as I'm aware if he's a father or mother. I don't know. Does it make any differences, in terms of who's more aggressive in terms of the child's of?
It will for defining roles, because like the brother was saying, we have got a confusion in defining lines, and part of it is due to obviously money.
Yeah.
So whoever's making the most noise might be earning the most money.
Yeah.
And they think they've got the power.
And yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, and I mean, I was just looking at something here. He mentioned, one of the notes, and it was from Love and Marriage. I think it was from it was the web of Imam Ghazali. I think Adab and Nikah, and it's something that we talked about in the earlier on kind of thing. And when the Sheikh mentioned it, goes, marry, then learn to love each other. And the other one was marriage is based on mutual understanding and harmony. I think we kind of covered that as well. And the next is quite interesting as well. And this is something we see more often, because love is not required in preparation for marriage. And love is I think it gives it quite definitely. The love is an indication of the highest level. The Sufis, absence of senses in witnessing the beloved. And then true love takes away all quarrels. So I think
something just came to me now. I mean, do you think women are under a lot more pressure now in this day and age? Because there are women out there with careers. There's a lot more women out there with careers, and then they become moms. And at the same time, they'll have to. They're coming home, they're cooking. And the other chores and everything. Do you think that could be one of the reasons why you can get a conflict, people are, because this will have an effect on tiredness, tiring somebody out, I mean, what do you think?
I think within the Muslim context, definitely, because like we said, the role of the spouses has changed. So you haven't got now the majority of Muslim women now staying at home bringing children necessarily. Sometimes the woman can be even the breadwinner, and the man is, because he can't find a job or because she earns more, she's the breadwinner kind of thing, and he's the one that's kind of looking after the children, and there's almost a complete role reversal. So definitely roles have changed, and that's going to have some effect on I mean, I've heard some women say, look, now I'm earning, I'm going to be the one that makes the decisions. We're talking about the power. So you do get those kind of situations. So it is changing. Positive or negative, it's difficult to tell, but there are some.
I think that is a common problem that this sort of is quite, that you see that in terms of career sort of direction wise, you find that sometimes even prior to any marriage taking place, you find a lot of women, especially who are so very career minded, who are pursuing some kind of profession, they can stipulate or demand a lot of sort of conditions, basically.
Yeah.
Which I think I don't see.
You mean pre-nikah? You're talking about like before they get married.
Which is fine, and then you find that, as you mentioned, that women who tend to be career minded, working kind of thing, and that can cause some kind of problem, especially if the husband is not working, or if they're, as you mentioned, if they're earning less or something like that. But is that like a sort of I don't know, is that stereotype thing that's we need to sort of get rid of, or is there any valid sort of?
You mean? I'm not saying that women working is necessarily a bad thing, but I'm just saying that it does have an effect on the roles, the traditional roles.
Yeah.
So then you have to figure out, so what are our roles? What are the roles? Do we complement each other? Who's bringing up the children? So sometimes now it's neither parent, sometimes it's a stranger, a nanny, or some
iPhone,
or iPhone, that kind of thing. So then you have to figure out now what are the dynamics of the family? How do we bring children tarbiyah? Who gives tarbiyah? Traditionally, it used to be the mother. Now who gives it, because the mother is at work?
Yeah.
And the father, he may be looking for work, but but he hasn't got the tools to give that tarbiyah as the mother would traditionally. So I think it's just going to have an impact on families. But I wouldn't say it's haram for the woman to work and things like that. I wouldn't say that, because the scholars have said in times of necessity, or if they've got a particular role for women out of demand in certain kind of professions, then that's fine.
That's that's something interesting as well. You have one where somebody working which might not be appropriate, suitable. We leave for them to decide. The other thing is sometimes you find that whether there's a need for because of the vacuum there, i.e., for instance, female doctors or whatever, female professions that's needed to serve the Muslim community, and you find that sometimes I've come across where women are qualified to fulfill those roles, but because of tradition, culture, whatever it is, they kind of sacrifice that, or they're reluctant to take up that role.
What I'm thinking is, I mean, there needs to be more compromise. Because if you got a female that's working, I mean, it's going to change things. I mean, we've got, so it's changing roles. I mean, she's going out working, then she's coming back home. She's possibly going to have to cook as well. Then if she has a baby, so it puts a lot of pressure on. So there needs to be more compromise between husband and wife, and work a way out so they both can have the kind of things that she can have a career, but at the same time there is some sort of flexibility. I think the lack of communication can result in conflict when you have this situation, because if she comes, the husband's expecting when he's going to be home, there's going to be food there, and if there isn't and she's tired, I mean, that can result in conflict. So there needs to be more compromise, I personally feel, and more discussions.
I think part of the stress can be neutralised if the husband cooks. It's not a big deal, because I think part of a sister working and then coming home, who's going to cook the food? Ain't a big deal, man. The food's cooked. You come home, get in the bath, have a shower, chill out, and relax. Food's done.
Or take turns.
I think it's interesting because again, there's this general perception or this stereotypes of perception of men, basically, where they are very demanding that food should be cooked by a female woman. You know what I mean? Do you think it's
don't agree with that.
Is that a Muslim culture, or is that like a sort of, I don't know, non-Muslim Western culture?
That's laziness, though. That's pure. To me, it's just pure laziness.
No, because
and not having skills in the kitchen. It doesn't take too much to whip something up. You've seen your mother, your sisters, your wives put food together, and you haven't got that much intelligence that you can't take a knife, a few bits and bobs. Don't let me finish what I'm saying, man. And cook something. Well, I don't know what's the breakdown.
But the reality is that is a traditional, culture. I mean, it's a part of the Western culture. From the people from the subcontinent. Traditionally, when the husband used to come home, he would expect food to be on the table. That happened here, but it also happened in the subcontinent. But in this day and age, I mean, there should be compromises. Why can't the husband cook?
Yeah, you're right. It happens here.
Or take turns.
You're right. It happens here, because on Mars we don't have to worry about food or who's cooking. It's when I came here.
I mean, so something like that, it can cause a problem. For instance, whose role is it to cook, or who should be doing the cooking kind of thing? Because you find that if you listen to scholars, and from an Islamic perspective, from what I understand, the cooking responsibility is not on women, basically, to cook.
No, right. It's a good sunnah to help in the kitchen, and etc.
And if you look at from prophetic tradition that you find, or even if you just look at the Salaf tradition, you find, generally speaking, food wasn't a major thing as well, because I think that can create a lot of problem as well. You find some, you hear stories, or you hear like comments sometimes, old wives' tales or whatever it is, that the food was too hot, or it was too cold, or it was too salty, or it's too much sugar in there, not enough sugar in there, kind of thing.
Make it yourself.
And those kind of things leads to some kind of conflicts or arguments and stuff like that.
Yeah. And again, this guy who defines these 5 things, one of them is, it can include cooking, because he's talking about acts of service for each other. So where spouses can help in marriages is, like you say, cooking.
Yeah.
So if generally the wife is working, why shouldn't the man cook? He should do it as an act of service, because the Prophet ﷺ, we know that he used to do service at home. He used to cook, he used to clean, he used to mend his own clothes, that kind of thing.
It just takes a little bit of humble to cook.
And also, sometimes when the husband is at work, there's no harm in the wife. So for example, sometimes I'm getting bad at DIY as I get older, but my wife is better than me. She give me a hand, and there's nothing wrong with that. Because of this kind of role definition, people say, "What the heck is she doing?" Giving the husband a hand, putting a wardrobe up. But there's nothing wrong with that, and I think it increases mutual love when you do that. You have a laugh together. You break the wardrobe and you end up buying a new one or whatever. But it's talking about acts of service, and all these things that he mentions are really, they're all, obviously he's not read the life of the Prophet ﷺ, every single one of them is embodied in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, what he mentions in terms of acts of service and saying good words to each other, those kind of things.
It's interesting because a lot of the sort of the way the Western philosophy sort of looks at some of these issues like the marriage and stuff like that, and they sort of break it down into different sort of segments, and you find that it's very much sort of concurs with the prophetic teaching as well. Hands-on thing as well. It's sometimes just the wording or the way it's explained. It's different. It's more simplified. It's more comprehensible for us in terms of in this day and age sometimes. And it would be nice if scholars were able to do that kind of thing, take the prophetic teaching and sort of simplify it in modern context, basically, where we can relate to it. And you mentioned last time, I remember with the Imam Zayd Shaki, when he did that course that he mentioned, 7 Seals of Happy Marriage, and one of the other key things what he mentioned, like for instance, deepen trust and fight fear, manage your anger, diffuse power struggle, and that's one of the issues as well. Diffuse power struggle in terms of each other's role kind of thing. Just because you're a man doesn't mean that you have to be the dominant one. It doesn't mean that things have to go according to what you say and how you should go, basically. And
there should be a discussion, and there should be a mutual decision.
But there are also just something that came into my mind. There's there are some problematic issues in terms of I was thinking in particular if the wife is working and she's the breadwinner. If, for example, we know Islamically her earnings are her earnings, and if she refuses to spend her earnings on bills and things like that, that can sometimes be problematic. I know most of the times wives will compromise and they know if they're the breadwinner, they're earning, they'll pay the bills. But there are kind of fiqhy issues, kind of Sharia issues on, does she have to now pay towards the bills or the rent and things like that when she's earning in her own right? What would happen in that kind of situation? I don't know what the answer is.
It definitely complicates things.
So it depends. For me, I see things in a different way. It depends how selfish you are, because I understand if the wife's got more assets than the husband, and the husband's in need of help, and the wife ain't contributing or helping out, then that, to me, that makes her selfish. There's no ifs, buts,
but she's within her rights, though, isn't she? Islamically, that's what I'm saying.
I have no disagreement.
Whereas
with that.
she can give that as sadaqah. That's not a problem at all. She can spend all of it as much as she likes. But if he just says, look,
I don't have to.
But
that just shows she's pure selfish, then, isn't it? That's what I'm trying to say. It's not a case of hiding behind the rights of the fiqh.
Because it's a real issue now, I think, within some marriages, that because of this kind of role reversal now, because women tend to earnings are much better, they tend to be more professional, that kind of certain jobs. This is becoming an issue, I think, in certain cases. I don't know how large the problem is.
But that becomes like an oppression of power then as well. This is exactly what I'm trying to say. Is money doesn't make the power, or it doesn't make you the dominant role in the relationship, or your assets don't make you the dominant role. Because if you've got and the other person hasn't, and it's not a case of balance it. I don't know, would it come under generosity or not being selfish or to help out?
Well, we know that every penny she gives is a sadaqah anyway. She would get rewarded abundantly for it.
Because what I was going to say, you mentioned is quite interesting, because what I find is it is a common thing. Sometimes you hear that sometimes women use it or men use it, kind of thing. Either to usurp what doesn't necessarily belong to them. And or sometimes women might use it in terms of to be what you would say to be miserliness, kind of thing, by not sharing. And I find that very strange, because if you're a couple who are married to each other, you should be sort of very considerate in terms of how you approach and what you sort of should be given as well. And I think that's a valid thing that you mentioned. That I think that's a very strange scenario that you're seeing more and more, basically, because
or making out you've got more assets or status than you actually have.
That's something else as well.
How you look.
Okay, we're gonna go to our second break and news after that as well. So we're discussing the subject of some of the common problems in a marriage and finding ways of to some kind of solutions towards it. So we'll be back shortly after this break and news as well.
This is your local community station, Iman FM on 103.1 FM.
مشاعر صادقة. إعداد وتقديم مريم صابونة. الإعداد إيمان 103.1 FM. كل يوم سبت من الساعة 1:30 وحتى 3 بعد الظهر. كونوا معنا.
In the city of Sheffield, if you ever have an accident, do not fear. Mr. Compensator is here. He can provide you with a taxi, prestige, or 4x4 replacement vehicle in just 2 hours. Call 0114 3863 386 or visit mrcompensator.co.uk and let the experts manage your claim.
जरा गड्डी रोको ये क्या भीड़ भड़क नजर आ रहा है
हवलदार साहब ये सब जायका के लिए आए हैं
वो जायका
ये लोग जायका टेक अवे के जायकेदार खानों का जायका लेने आए हुए हैं फिश मसाला नान चिकन टिक्का नान लैम्ब टिक्का नान शीश टिक्का नान
वो मैं सद के जाऊं वो जायका कबाब्स एंड स्वीट्स पर
जायका से ताजा मिठाइयां और कढ़ाई गोश्त भी मिलता है
Zaika Kebab and Sweets 2 to 4 Chippingham Place Sheffield telephone 01142425 800 Zaika also at 66 Wellgate Rotherham telephone 01709 300 400
Assalamu alaikum, this is Khalil Muhammad coming to you with an urgent appeal. One Community has established the first Islamic education, deaf and special educational needs center where deaf Muslims and non-Muslims can attend Islamic classes to learn more about Islam using sign language.
However, this center is under serious threat and we need your Qarazi Hasna, a beautiful loan and your zakat to help us keep it open. Please visit our website islamfordeaf.co.uk, that's Islam FORDEAF.co.uk or give us a call on 0121 291 7847.
क्या आप रेडियो प्रेजेंटर बनना चाहते हैं या मीडिया इंडस्ट्री ज्वाइन करना चाहते हैं अपनी आवाज के जरिए अपनी कम्युनिटी की खिदमत करने का सुनहरी मौका ईमान एफएम पर आइए हम आपको बनाएंगे रेडियो प्रेजेंटर स्टूडियो ट्रेनिंग से लाइव प्रोग्रामिंग तक की तरबियत हासिल करने के लिए राब्ता करें 0114242051 या ईमेल कीजिए info@imanfm.com
Equity Law Chambers Solicitors. When your rights are at stake, you need experienced defence lawyers. The law firm of Equity Law. Our experienced team of professionals can assist you in all matters including family law, immigration, criminal law, drug offences, road traffic cases, fraud and money laundering. Call us today for expert advice on 01709 36 86 03 or visit us at elc-solicitors.co.uk. Equity Law Chambers Solicitors, advocating your rights.
Had an accident, not your fault. Khan Solicitors, a team of professionals dedicated to winning you 100% compensation with free advice and assistance. Over 15 years of experience assisting you with road traffic accidents, trips, slips, employer's liability. We can recover your uninsured losses, i.e. vehicle damage, recovery, storage and loss of earnings. Khan Solicitors, 351 Abbeydale Road, Sheffield. Come see us or call 0114 258 3399 or visit khansolicitors.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Connecting you to your community. This is Iman FM.
You're listening to Iman FM. Time for the news.
Consequences if the war fails to deal with the threat posed by North Korea. Police believe a breast surgeon who's been convicted of carrying out completely unnecessary operations may have done it to boost his earnings. Ian Patterson, who works at private hospitals in the West Midlands, has been found guilty of 20 counts of wounding. The 59-year-old invented or exaggerated cancer risks to convince patients to go under the knife. One of them was Debbie Douglas.
I had a full mastectomy and I had chemotherapy, which I didn't need. So to me, it was a money-making machine, but he did have some kind of almost God complex where he tells you he's cured you.
Police investigating the murder of a former Royal Navy officer outside his home in Manchester have now charged a man. Ryan Gibbons, who's 29 and from Chiltern, is due in court tomorrow after Mike Samwell was run over by his own car. Donald Trump has told American gun owners the assault on their constitutional rights is over. He's the first president to address the National Rifle Association since Ronald Reagan 34 years ago. He said they have a true friend in the White House.
No longer will federal agencies be coming after law-abiding gun owners. No longer will the government be trying to undermine your rights and your freedoms as Americans.
A major earthquake has struck off the island of Mindanao in the Philippines. Experts warn there's a risk of tsunami waves as far away as Indonesia. In football, Newcastle have kept the championship title race alive for another day at least by beating Cardiff 2-0. Brighton would have been champions if Newcastle lost. And Ross County are up to 7th in the Scottish Premiership after thrashing Inverness 4-0. That's the latest. I'm Annie Joyce.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. You listen to Real Talk on Iman FM 103.1 FM. I'm your host Iqbal, and in the studio I got with Mansoor, Hashmi and Shabir as well. We're discussing the subject of some of the common problems that could occur in a marriage and the impact and solutions as well to these issues. For our listeners in Luton and Nottingham, if you listen to Dawn FM or Inspire FM, studio hotline is Sheffield. That's 0142425 or you could send a message or WhatsApp on 07885599786. I think this is you could go on and all those things as well. I think one of the other sort of common problems, I think from what I was saying is a lot of the time issues arises within a sort of couple, and so what do they do in terms of to deal with those issues?
That's the big problem, isn't it? That's the big question.
If nobody wants to give ground on it, it's a stalemate.
Yeah.
And it's, like I said, it's undertones. If the present problem diffuses over time, not a solution, just diffuses the stress for the time, then when something trivia arises later on, then this problem is going to come back to the surface and bubble things up.
Well, the thing is, because we've already mentioned this social dynamic, all the family structures change. You don't have that extended family protection anymore. Them coming along, just helping you out, sitting there, just getting things in order. That doesn't happen anymore. That again, so you two on your own, and that can escalate. And if you're not going to seek any help from somebody or having somebody sit there and just help you resolve the issue, then
like an elder or neutral person. Because back in the day, but in the old times, because the marriage was in a family unit, then you'd have a bit of shame and self-respect than to start having a fight in the courtyard in front of everybody, like EastEnders or Coronation Street or one of these stupid.
Because sometimes you need somebody else to show you, to get you to see sense. And so unfortunately that doesn't happen anymore, and so it just escalates.
So where do couples go, or what should they do? If,
don't go.
And so we know people, non-Muslims who have problems in marriages, they have access to counsellors, and there's marriage guidance and relay, those kind of charities that exist for. So they could, I suppose they could go there, but the problem, from my observation, is from a Muslim context, a lot of those people don't really understand the kind of problems they get. They'll stereotype the kind of problems that Muslim couples are going through.
Do you think a lot of problems that could occur between couples are what we would define as sort of religiously based, basically, or are they just like common sort of universal issues, basically?
I think when you're meeting somebody to get married, if there's regarding Muslim adab, if there's that adab there for the honesty and trust, etc., then there shouldn't be a conflict later on. I think maybe some of the problem occurs when there's a sleight of hand before the marriage.
Most often, they are trivial issues which escalate and they just get worse and worse. A snowball effect. It is the trivial issues, but the thing is, like brothers mentioned, where do they go? There's very few places that these couples can actually go. Unfortunately, the mosques are not geared up for this. The mom sobs don't have that ability, most of the moms out there, to guide these couples or get them to see sense or come up with a compromise, because they don't have any training and counseling. They might not even be able to communicate with them, because that couple might only speak English, and the moms are speaking Punjabi or Urdu, and so unfortunately there are very few places out there for these Muslim couples to go to get sensible advice.
Yeah, and it's very important to be careful who you speak in front of, because you might be talking to your spouse's friends, and you think they're their friends, and they'll turn and stab ex-person in the back, and then you find out who your real friends are.
So I think that's true. That's being very. I mean, like for instance, like the example, like if you have a situation, for instance, you got a couple, and the father wants to sort of direct their children towards a certain career or certain sort of education in one way, and then you have the mother, she wants to direct them towards some different way, kind of thing, opposite to it. And so that's got nothing to do with the sort of like a religious issue, is it, as such? So
I understand what you're saying,
and
but
that in itself can.
You're saying that non-religious issues can be solved by kind of secular mediation. You can go to.
No, I'm just saying because you find that there are certain you hear of or come across where a situation with the conflict, it's not necessarily on religious ground, basically.
Yeah.
Sometimes a lot of
I agree with that. Yeah. But sometimes it is. Although the issue may not be religious, but sometimes the solution to it may involve referral to Islam, that kind of thing, in terms of mediation, in terms of roles, that kind of thing. The problem with a lot of my kind of experience of marriage counsellors can like relate, their models are based on sometimes I don't know how they put it, but they have like sexual kind of more Freudian kind of principles, that kind of thing. So they say the problem's due to sex or some problems with the relationship, intimate relationships. So they're related to that rather than other things, which in a Muslim context it could be that. But what I'm saying is that they will not understand from a Muslim point of view why certain couples are having certain problems and what the solutions are.
I mean, that in itself, I think it's quite interesting what you mentioned, is that you find that a lot of I wouldn't say it's common, but I think it's a major problem you find that between spouses, where the conflict arises sometimes because of loss of attraction between them two, or fidelity, basically, you know what I mean, where they're looking at sort of their attraction towards someone other than their spouse, basically, and that in itself is a major problem. And so when it comes to resolving that, then who do they go to? Because sometimes the thing that I find is somewhat insulting, because everyone knows, pretty much most people know, the common sense knows what is halal and what is haram. Yet obviously we have shortcomings, and we fall into it, basically. So obviously there's something that we need, someone a bit more wiser, qualified, using that from an Islamic principle, Islamic ethos, but at the same time, some of the solutions that you might go to some mediation services. I'm not saying if it is contradicting Islamic belief or practice, that's one thing. But I mean, I've not spoken, but I've not come across any. It'd be interesting to.
Well, there is one.
If anyone uses any of the services, how the approach is, or what their approach is, basically.
And that's why there's a need, I think, for Muslim kind of oriented counselling.
Yeah.
And I know, for example, there's one sheikh. I don't know if Sheikh Ahmad Jamil. He's a trained scholar as well as a trained counsellor as well. So this is exactly what he does. He kind of mediates between Muslim couples within the Islamic context, and the solution that he gives
I've heard him actually, and mashallah, he's a brother and a scholar who I have a lot of high respect, because, as you mentioned, he was from what you would define as secularist of what's it called, career-minded object. I think it was pursuing as a lawyer, as a solicitor, or something like that. And then he sort of changed to Islamic studies to become a scholar, a sheikh. But he didn't stop there. Then he wanted to serve the community, and as you mentioned, he's trained to be a counsellor for thing as well. Which
he's from Scotland, but he does come down, and he's currently doing a course, I think, in a few weeks in Manchester, which I've been to that course, and it's a really good course.
So that's something,
for married couples.
To have someone like that who's was firmly grounded in Islamic knowledge in terms of.
But unfortunately, that's what's lacking at the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look around, the brothers mentioned one scholar, and the whole United Kingdom. I'm sure there must be more, but there's few and far between, and that's the main thing, because the thing is to understand you, to understand your background, where you're from, because it's all well and good going to relate or some of these other places where you can get counselling, but the thing is your background's totally different, their background's totally different. Are they going to be able to relate to you? And in terms of Islamically looking for answers as well. So this is where we need more scholars, that English speaking scholars that can go and do some of this counselling, get this qualification and help the community out, or there needs to be like organizations out there where Islamically minded Muslims take up this career and provide this service for the Muslims out there.
Or even imams, I think they should have, because they're dealing with people day in, day out, with marriage problems, that kind of thing. Imams in just, ordinary mosques, they could have some kind of training for them to be able to give basic counselling, and then if there's deeper problems, maybe refer them on.
Because these moms are going out to houses. I mean, people are sometimes calling them to sit there and listen to both sides and give a solution or help them to come to with a compromise. So it would be a lot more beneficial if they had training in counselling, and then the chances of the success would be a lot better. And we really need English. I mean, I want to reiterate this: English-speaking imams out there.
No, I think that's definitely you need someone who can speak your tongue, basically. In order to A, understand what you're saying, and B, to advise you on what to do as well. With total clarity, which is obviously without a shadow of doubt. That's why we definitely need English-speaking scholars. And I mean, because in the past, with some of my jobs in the past, I've actually sat in. I remember, I attended a course on counselling. I think a while ago. It was I think it was like a sort of counselling, sort of mediation services. It's a one-day course, and from what I've seen is, as you mentioned, imams. It doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't take a lot of effort, or it doesn't take a lot of cost to get that skill, basically.
To train somebody up to that level.
Yeah.
And this is where I feel the mosques are missing a trick. Because if you look at mosques, the majority of mosques, obviously 95% of the mosques, they're open half an hour before Salah time, and half an hour afterwards they close. And that's mosque is there, just closed. It's not serving the community, doing anything apart from just they got a building there. So why can't this mosque be more inclusive and have an imam, or even have somebody else who has Islamic knowledge from the community, has got qualifications in counselling, and can provide this service?
I think that's something we'll have to sort of continue the discussion in terms of the roles of mosque or roles of imam. I think in a different show. I think you're absolutely right.
Because if you look at classical scholars, this is something they weren't just imams who deliver sermons. They help people on an individual basis, and that's unfortunately not happening now. And that is something that's lacking. Unfortunately, the committees out there need to be focusing on this.
Yeah, there are loads of books that have been translated from classical texts in terms of that deals with people's suffering, so psychoanalysis kind of thing. People's psyche, people's mentality, people's. I wouldn't call it sophistic way. It's the modern sort of theory in terms of people like Freud and all those people, John Locke and all those. A lot of theory what they come up with in terms of how to. It's really from Islamic teaching.
Self-concept.
They've sort of twisted it, and they've let the Islamic perspective of the theological or the sacred or the holy aspect behind, and they've gone in a very sort of individualistic kind of perspective, basically.
Up to now, we've been talking about the couples having issues, or but sometimes people have issues in life. It could be the career, problems at work. It could be stress. It could be other issues. It could be illness, and this again has an impact on your marriage, and this can actually also lead to conflict and lead to divorce. So, being able to go to an imam or a scholar and get advice in terms of being more patient, just reflecting, seeing things in perspective, So this again would be greatly beneficial to couples out there.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's something that you mentioned earlier on in terms of having people to go to talk to them, to listen, and just tell them about your situation. It helps with healing process. Basically, it helps to eradicate some of the sort of ill feeling that you may have within yourself.
It helps you to unload as well, to unload that burden, because we are, most, if you've got stress at work and you're going home and you're taking all that stress with you, and if you can unload that, you feel a lot lighter and your relationship is going to be a lot more smoother. Because it has a huge impact on your relationship. The way you're going to talk to your spouse, you could be, you're in a bad mood and you come across aggressive. And so that's not going to do you any favors.
There is the other side of it where people who aren't too good at communicating about personal stuff to I wouldn't say a stranger, but relating to somebody else, and they keep it bottled up. And that's another problem. Unless you know how to deal with it. For me, it's zikr and speed bag, bro.
That's a big problem. Is it bottling up? Because some people just cannot. They find it embarrassing, even to their own spouses. Even on that level, even though they have an intimate relationship, physical, but they can't. When it comes to feelings, they just can't unload. So I feel that there needs to be even I personally feel there needs to be talks on this subject. Because how many talks do you actually get on this subject in mosques? To help people to realize this is not an embarrassing thing. It's more embarrassing to actually get a divorce than to go and talk to somebody, so you can become a better, somehow maybe cope with your problems.
I think to go on that level, I think you need somebody who actually studies psychology and that kind of subject, and more in depth be able to relate to people, especially it could be very sort of in tune with common problems as well, especially with things that are facing what we're having, new issues that's facing within our community, and that's definitely we need that more often. The studio hotline is 0142425 that's Sheffield 2425 and your WhatsApp number is 07885551976. You can go on Facebook and YouTube and book, or even Twitter as well, put any comments and thoughts as well. We're discussing some of the common problems that could occur between in marriage and how to resolve that. I think, would you say that it's advisable that if you find yourself where you can't communicate with each other, then go and speak to somebody else, basically, in a very simplistic way, shall I say? Obviously trying to find a qualified person depending on where you are, how your situation, how your circumstances is.
Do you mean can't communicate on a general level? Or
No, I'm talking about, for instance, if there's things within, if any sort of conflict between couples, and it's not getting resolved.
You need a neutral person to listen.
You need a neutral, like a mediation services, a counselling service, whatever it is. Because one of the key things I remember Chef mentioned on that course was sometimes people have baggages from, it could be before marriage or during marriage, something that's happened basically that needs a professional person, professional counselling basically. If it could be a traumatic experience, it could be something very severe, whatever it is, and that could be having an impact on your relationship with your spouse, causing other problems. So in order to resolve, in order to get a healthy relationship, you have to treat that problem. And which, I don't know, you don't see that, for instance, a lot of the time, and I remember the Shah mentioned, Imam Day Shakir mentioned, because sometimes certain experiences that person goes through has a massive impact on their future in terms of their relationship with their spouse or with their children. Sometimes they might have experienced things, it could be
some kind
abuse,
of trauma,
physical abuse, mental abuse,
bullying, trauma, injuries, illness,
sexual abuse, something like that. That kind of thing from a young age can have a massive impact. And that's where the chef mentioned, because one of the key thing is, obviously you have to know, but sometimes you have to go to counseling services to resolve those issues, because especially if you're not discussing those issues with your spouse or with your partner, then, or even if you discuss it with him, he might not be the best person to give you advice or to overcome this problem. And we know, traumatic experience can have massive, post-traumatic experience can have a massive impact on your psychology in terms of how you...
The whole personality can
how you interact with people.
Change your personality and the way you treat other people, or you perceive other people, and the fears that you have. So to seek help. I think that can only be a good thing.
In terms of Sharia, mediation is the step before divorce, isn't it? You're supposed to go to, the brother mentioned, an independent mediator. But the problem is we live at a time when you don't have many. I mean, can you think of if I'm having marriage problems, usually somebody within your family, it traditionally was somebody who's independent, who knows both spouses, but is independent enough not to take sides, not to become political, and that's the difficulty. And the other thing is confidentiality. And there's not much confidence.
That's a huge problem, because a lot of people would be really put off by this.
Definitely.
Because if they knew that their problem is shared, and they talk in front of somebody, and then it becomes public, and it becomes a point of gossip. I mean, that's really bad. So people who need to think as well, if they're going to mediate, they need to make sure it's confidential and.
I mean, you need honesty and integrity, as well,
because you need to have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you're disclosing somebody's personal things.
And a lot of people today will rather offer you a shaitani to split you up than give you a good advice to keep it together. And a lot of people today they're just doing shaitan's work and causing problems.
They're being political, aren't they? Because they've got some angle or some bias. Usually a family thing, or they'll, instead of trying to solve your problem, they'll make it worse.
And not just isolate the family, you know, your close friends who just want to have one over you, and they think it's funny. It's not funny. You're causing problems in people's homes where you know that's a.
Unfortunately, that's a big reality, because friends or even certain family members can wind people up. Or why is he doing this? Why is he doing this? Or why is she doing this? Why is she doing that? You know, and these little trivial things, or nothing. Or could be absolutely nothing, and create a problem, and which leads to conflict, and it can go it can escalate, and then you can get all these negative outcomes.
Okay. On that thought, I just got a couple of things in terms of I was asked to raise a couple of issues as well. One is sometimes problems can occur due to external reason, i.e. in-laws. So how do you solve that? That is a common sort of ground for arguments and problems, basically, between couples or spouses.
Unfortunately, I mean, that is a problem. I mean, I've seen that in where you have families. They might not have been happy with the marriage to begin with, and later on they start causing issues, and they want the son or even the daughter to split up. Unfortunately, that is a big problem.
Is that a living arrangement, or is that like a sort of relationship?
It sometimes can be living arrangements as well.
Is that sort of like just because of family members who you come in contact with?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
You know, if again, go back to the Islamic foundation of Muslims, if people paid attention to where we got our blood from and honoured that, there wouldn't be none of this deception going on before the marriage or after the marriage, or somebody else trying to throw 2p in to split two people up. It's ridiculous.
I think that's tricky. I remember Sheikh Hamza mentioned once, and he said that, I think because he mentioned that everyone should learn what their rights and responsibilities are, and towards to each other, basically.
Because what I can see again is how society's progressed. Is some people have got that sad lives, they've got to go and stick their fingers in somebody else's pie for a thrill.
That's the biggest problem, isn't it? People don't know what their obligations are and what their rights are, and they're not. I mean, the obligation, what you're supposed to do for your wife, if you're not even fulfilling any of that, then there are going to be conflicts, and vice versa. So people need to understand their roles Islamically, and if you stuck to them, things wouldn't be so difficult. Things would be a lot more fluid, and the chances of the marriage being successful would be a lot greater.
I mean, in terms of how do we prepare the future generation, shall we say? Somebody's looking to us if they want to get married.
For marriage.
Yeah.
First, pull the plug on the internet and do it the old way and go back to natural stuff.
That's finding one. Brother Shabir, because I know
we need to. I think
chicken, but
it's something that I didn't have. When I got married, but connection with learned people, with scholars, who are going to teach you basically rights and responsibilities of marriage before you go into. So, alhamdulillah, there's lots of, I mentioned the one with Sheikh Ahmad Jamil, but there's lots of courses now being run for pre-marriage, for people who are about to get married, for them to know the rights and responsibilities before marriage. Yeah, it's theory, but it's something that we never had, and it's a connection to the scholars, and it's knowledge directly from those scholars to the Prophet ﷺ.
Okay, we're going to continue with our discussion after the final break, so we'll be back after this.
Equipping the generation towards a cohesive society. This is Iman FM.
ईमान रेडियो 103.1 FM के सुनने वालों की खिदमत में परवेज यूसुफ का मोदबाना सलाम। मैं आपके लिए एक खूबसूरत प्रोग्राम ला रहा हूं, चमनज़ारे गज़ल, एक यादगार प्रोग्राम सुनना ना भूलिएगा 103.1 ईमान FM पर।
Khan Solicitors, experienced criminal defense lawyers in defending your rights. We can assist you get the best possible outcome if you're involved in any criminal matters, including murder, drug offences, sexual offences including grooming, terrorism, fraud and money laundering. We can provide free advice and assistance 24/7 at the police station. Call us on 0114 258 3399 at 351 Abbeydale Road, Sheffield. Visit us at khansolicitors.com. Over 20 years experience in defending your rights.
क्या आप बच्चों की शादी के सिलसिले में परेशान हैं? क्या आप बर्तानिया में ही बच्चों की शादी करना चाहते हैं? क्या आप एक अच्छे रिश्ते की तलाश में हैं? अगर इन सवालों का जवाब हाँ में है, तो आपका मसला हल हो गया। बर्तानिया में रिहाइश पजीर आला तालीम याफ्ता किसी भी बरादरी के अच्छे रिश्तों के लिए आप राब्ता मैरिज हेल्पलाइन से इस टेलीफोन नंबर पर राब्ता कायम करें 01142425 राब्ता मैरिज हेल्पलाइन, मुसलमान खानदानों को करीब लाने का राब्ता।
Coversure Insurance Rotherham are your friendly local brokers who can insure all your needs, whether it is for your own car, home or property you let. We also have specialist insurers for your shop, restaurants and takeaways. We can cover all aspects of the motor trade, and we have some excellent rates for taxis, minibuses and commercial vehicles, including fleet policies. All written quotes can be beaten. Please call us today on 01709 556 230. We are open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday.
Sheffield's finest buffet restaurant, Mirpuri Dera, reviving the taste of Asian subcontinent. Extensive buffet with more than 40 dishes.
नई इंतजामिया, नया साफ सुथरा माहौल, मुनफरिद खाने, 40 से ज़ायद dishes, party organizer, मशरकी रवायात का अलंबरदार, halal food.
Mirpuri Dera, Stanifeth Road, Darnell, 0114 244 9199 under new management.
जेड़ा भी पाए एक बारी फेरा, वो आवे बार-बार मीरपुरी डेरा.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम। हम आपके शुक्रगुजार हैं कि आपने अल हबीब वेलफेयर फाउंडेशन के साथ भरपूर तावन किया। आपके ज़कात, सदक़ात, फिदिया और सदक़ातुल फ़ितर बगैर किसी कमी के हम इंतहाई गरीब पसमानदा इलाकों के यतीमों, बेवाओं, माज़ूरों और ज़रूरतमंदों तक पहुँचाते हैं। अल्लाह ताला आपके तावन को कबूलियत का आला दर्जा अता फरमाए।
For more information, please contact Maulana Aslam Syed on 0789 454 0303 alhabibwelfarefoundation.co.uk.
In a world where accident claims are poorly managed and the referral fees paid are so low, and just when all hope is lost in the city of Sheffield, a hero emerges. A hero so powerful, one phone number is all you need. A hero named Mr. Compensator. For your referral fee of £2,000, call Mr. Compensator now on 0114 3863 386. Terms and conditions apply.
Locally at 103.1 on FM. Globally at imanfm.com on the internet. This is Iman FM.
The world is changed. I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth.
What were we and what have we become?
How are Muslims behaving?
What happened to education?
How do we integrate? All these and many more. Real problems, real situations. Join Amr and Iqbal for Real Talk every Friday 10 p.m. on Iman 103.1 FM.
Assalamualaikum, welcome back. You listen to Real Talk on Iman FM 103.1 FM. We're in our final section, and in the studio I got Brother Hashimi, Mansoor and Shabir. We're discussing the subject of some of the common problems can occur in marriages and how we can resolve them, or what solutions are there. I think there's a lot, in terms of conflicts arising between couples over many things. Sometimes, like it could be trivial. Sometimes there are valid reasons. And I think one of the things that you mentioned, is that some of the character of spouses, I think I was told, can lead to conflicts.
Yeah, and so I was specifically thinking about the character kind of makeup of people rather than spouses, but you could have two spouses who are totally different in character. So nowadays you talk about introverts and extroverts.
Yeah. So
say for example you've got those two and their spouses. It's chalk and cheese, complete opposite. And so what happens when they get married is, instead of compromising, the two spouses try to change each other, try to change their very nature. And in my 27 years of marriage, I've realised you're never going to change the characteristic nature of somebody. Somebody's an extrovert, you're never going to change them. Somebody's an introvert, you're never going to change them. So people spend a lot of time and effort trying to change each other, and there's a lot of conflict there, there's a lot of time wasted. So I think if you spend more time trying to understand each other's character and then compromise based on that, you'd be better off than rather than try to change.
It's right. The other thing, with that in mind, is that sometimes people's perception of how their relationship should be with their opposite spouse as well, can be, misconstrued, shall we say? Because
it could be fantasy. I mean, that could be just fantasy plans. The kind of relationship. I mean, it's based on books or kind of something from a magazine. Which is not based on reality or facts.
Because obviously,
if they don't get that, or that kind of experience, then that will lead to problems and conflicts.
That, to me, I can automatically see that goes back to bad parenting, where children are given, let's say for argument's sake, our people, an Indian movie or something to put on. That's their babysitter. Or
if you look at how marriage begins, just the wedding day, and how people are trying to outdo each other, and they're focusing the big days, everything, the clothes, the cars, the food, and the amount of money they're spending on that day, and they want the rest of their lives to be like that as well, over the top. But life isn't like that though. So so that again is even the beginning is not based. I mean, is that actually even Islamic? That we're kind of marriage they're having. I mean, with all this expenditure and all this lights and
I think that
else.
I mean, obviously those are some of the factors that could affect their relationship afterward, and you're absolutely right. And I think we mentioned that earlier on as well, in terms of the actual relationship between a couple, in terms of how they see each other, what kind of relationship they have. Sometimes people kind of, I don't know, because especially in Indian subcontinent, the old school kind of thing, you see very little affection kind of thing. I don't know, maybe I'm not talking about in privacy kind of thing. I'm talking about in terms of sometimes you wouldn't think that these two couples were married to each other kind of thing. Because of a total lack of affection. Just some, we're talking about just kind of sweet word kind of thing. I mean, just affection.
But the thing is, if somebody did show that, and then all of a sudden you would get other people talking about, oh, look at that, they're so besharm, they were holding hands, or they said something, oh Janu.
Wait,
so
it's funny because I missed that. What's that word?
Oh Janu.
I don't know what that means.
Sweetheart.
Okay.
I mean, it's funny because you see, especially in the Indian subcontinent, and as Brother Mansoor mentioned, he loves watching Bollywood films.
Thanks. We'll talk afterwards.
Because but you find, because there's this naturally sort of brainwashed with this perception of, as you mentioned, like Romeo and Juliet type of relationship.
Melodramatic. Everybody breaks out in song and dance.
But you never see that in real life kind of thing between couples, especially with the old school. I don't know, what I mean.
Yeah, it was more a private thing at that time. It wasn't an open thing to be shown.
Yeah,
so it wasn't on display.
The other thing I think you were saying as well, sometimes
I think that's changed though now.
Couples don't see each other as friends. They see them to like, your role is to be a mother, or your role is to be a father, or your role is to be a husband and provider, your role is to be like a wife who's a cook, clean, whatever. I
mean, something I noticed in the 20 odd years I've been married is that I very rarely see, and even in this country, couples walking together in public. I'm not talking about holding hands here. Just walking together. It's very rarely you see that within Muslims. Maybe London, but in Sheffield, I've rarely seen that. And when I do see it, I kind of think, wow, subhanallah, mashallah. You don't see that because the wife usually she's at home or wherever she is.
I was going to say,
and the husband's
5
usually,
years back, a few years back, something like that.
And the husband's he's with his friends, that kind of thing. And we were talking about who was the best friend of the Prophet ﷺ. You don't need to answer that. Everybody should know who was the best friend of the Prophet ﷺ. So why aren't our wives our best friends? Why are our mates our best friends, and our wives the woman at home and she's going to make me the cup of tea after I go and visit my mates at midnight and come home, and then she's going to be there to kind of take me to bed and cook for me again.
That's quite interesting, because that friendship, that fun side of relationship, where you're happy to spend that, what you would say like leisure time. That should be spent, or sometimes even some serious.
And I'm not
time.
knocking having friends, male friends, because that's also a natural part of relationships. But it's the balance I think that's lacking in a lot of our brothers, especially. I think I don't see that kind of thing.
And with that in mind, I thought it's before I sort of gone it, because the other thing was sometimes we have this the problems that could that could occur between couples. Do you think is more or less of with young couples or middle-aged couples in terms of who've been married for number 20 years or
problems?
Or what about like of couples who've been married for 50, 60 years? Elderly couples. Do you think problems could occur with their new problems or kind of thing?
I think they can occur at any time, simply because of the fact that Shaitan has vowed that he's going to try and break people up till they die. So perhaps as they get older, generally the theory is that people are a little bit more kind of tolerant towards each other, and they see their old age and they're kind of now preparing for something else. Perhaps in that sense they're kind of a bit more stable in that sense, so they don't have as many problems.
The reason why I mentioned it, I remember one of our teachers, he mentioned I think he had this beautiful story, and he mentioned his father, who was a sheikh as well, and he mentioned how this old chap, he came to his father, and after in the merchants, and then he mentioned he was having some issues with his wife. I think it was over the 70s, something like that. And they say like basically they've been married happily, and suddenly now they can't stand each other. They're always arguing, they're always fighting. And straight away, we thought that's quite strange. I think old couples have been fine for the past 50 years or whatever. Suddenly they start arguing, they can't stand each other, and stuff like that. And the sheikh, his father started asking him how was the relationship, and he started asking some questions, and then in the end what he told him, he goes, what's happened? He goes, when you got married you had children, and so your children was with you, you're too busy with your life to have a relation, you didn't know how to sort of have this husband-wife relationship, and then your children got old, but then they got married, and then they had children, so you had grandchildren keeping you preoccupied, and they're all living under one roof. And what had happened was his children had moved out, so all that was left just him and his wife. Now they had to talk to each other, and they didn't know how to talk to each other, so they're always arguing and fighting and stuff like that. So sometimes we forget that our busy lifestyle can distract us. And the sheikh told him, he told that old man, he goes, go to the market, buy some flowers, go home to your wife, tell her some sweet way. And I was just thinking, we forget this notion of romanticizing kind of thing. That should be there, with spouses. It's not anything to be embarrassed. I'm not saying do it in public. I'm not saying do it in a degradable manner. But sometimes forget that. And the sheikh mentioned that you should remember that you need to do that just to keep that attraction between a couple.
So this guy again, he mentions things like physical touch, which is people think of physical touch, and I'm not talking about sexual intimacy. I'm just talking about physical touch. When you're just at home and you might kind of touch each other, hold each other's hands, caress somebody's hair. Sorry if I'm embarrassing people.
Cuddle.
But the cuddle, that kind of thing. Those kind of things are massively important when it comes to kind of, making that relationship better. So he mentions that. The same similar kind of things that you mentioned.
That kind of social grooming brings closeness as well.
Yeah.
Got a couple of others of another two things as well. It's quite funny as well. One is another issue that can be brought up is when it comes to like sort of doing art and decor work kind of thing. I think I've been told, especially with the women, because a man can't choose to
put two colours together to match them up.
Yeah, so if you want to avoid any kind of conflicts, leave it to the women, leave it to the expert, as they say. Don't go there.
Let her pick them, you put them up.
That's it, yeah. That's quite interesting because I don't know, because I think we were talking earlier on in terms of cooking and stuff like that.
Men can be creative and artistic. I see no reason for this type of role to be.
I think most men can cook, but I think sometimes
won't cook. It's won't cook, isn't it? They can cook, but they won't cook.
They just choose not to cook, I think.
A message to these brothers: you're giving vital points to yourself, for the hereafter.
I mean, just
make
go to
a
any
meal for your wife.
Just go to any restaurant or a hotel, or who are the main cooks there, or the chefs?
They get paid for it.
So some of the top.
In my defense, I cook a mean eggy bread. So,
but then again, men are very sort of critical of food as well. So if you're critical of something, then you should be able to produce it yourself as well.
Back him up, that's right.
Back him up. So but then again,
that does show that men can actually cook.
Yeah,
they won't cook. That's
the thing. They won't just do it.
If you cooked a delicious meal for your partner, and the reaction what she'll give you is a beautiful feeling.
Definitely.
But there are guys out there that do actually cook and and actually enjoy it. So it's not, you can't stereotype it, but there are people out there.
Yeah.
So, but this is something that needs to be worked upon. And what the brother said earlier on, we need to try to understand the people who are married. They need to understand their spouse and get to know them better and become more friends and know them, how they work, rather than forcing each other upon. So that leads to just conflict.
I've got another one here. Physical attraction. Physical attraction can be the physical non-attraction, shall we say, can be the cause of conflict between couples as well. Sometimes you find that either the wife or the husband, sometimes they just don't care in terms of their physical appearance.
Or the appearance.
Or the image, just kind of let it loose kind of thing, in terms of physical or outward appearance, kind of, in terms of clothes and stuff like that. That can be a cause of conflict as well.
Definitely. And I think this is more kind of men kind of tend to let go in marriage a little bit. I'm thinking about myself. Women tend to still, make an effort, I think more than perhaps men do. Men kind of, as soon as they get married, tend to
lose
let
that
go.
big belly, Marriage is not about long distance relationship.
So what? Sorry, I missed that.
Marriage is not about long distance relationship.
Long distance. Oh.
So I think as you mentioned, I think physical thing. I think that's something. I think it's.
We know some of the Sahaba, they used to really make an effort.
Yeah.
When it came to, having intimacy with their wives or generally spending time, they used to make an effort on themselves.
Actually, it's interesting because I remember I did this course, and when I was looking into it quite in depth about one of the practices, I think it was when I went to Spain, I think, public bath places.
Right.
Public bath places, and it's mentioned how it was a common thing in the Islamic Empire, and now it's more common in the sort of Western civilization. But in the past, it was public bath places. They're everywhere.
Right.
And I used to wonder, why did they have? For me, for some reason, I thought it was the place where people used to go and bathe, kind of thing. Because they didn't have within their dwelling to go and wash, like a washroom, basically. And then I was reading, and it mentioned the public bath places was for men when they're returning from travel. Rather than go straight home, they would go wash, clean themselves up, and groom themselves before they went home, basically. And as you mentioned, like
and I also heard something else. Just the other day, I mentioned there was some ruling on when men return from travel, so it might be related to this, that not to go home. They were not. It was not, recommended for them not to go home straight away if they were returning from a long journey.
Yeah.
To stay overnight somewhere else to allow the wife to prepare herself for her husband.
An answer arrival.
Yeah. So that she's not just caught, dishevelled or just unaware.
So that's
it goes both ways, doesn't it? Really.
So these type of interaction, relationship kind of thing, how it should be done, other mannerism.
Yes,
I think it's very strange to us because of the way our lifestyle is, kind of thing. And you can see some of the problems. For instance, if one finds some kind of thing detestable about the other, that can lead to problem, because like I said, I mean, it could be major or minor, although we don't know, but that can be resolved with making some effort,
with better communication,
and also understanding as well. Sometimes we need to solve things as well. So
that sometimes occurs when the couple are having problems, and then one or both of the couples start looking elsewhere as a solution to those problems. So the husband may now start, maybe I should get married again, maybe that'll solve my problems. And the wife thinks maybe I should, or she might be talking to somebody online, that kind of thing. And they're the kind of things that, instead of concentrating on your problems, you tend to basically make the problem worse by doing these kind of things. So that is this phenomenon called emotional affairs, where people are having non-contact, where there's no contact, but they're just talking to each other online. And when the wife actually finds out, it can cause divorce, it can cause a lot of problems. So
that's something as well. And
I mean, one thing, I want to say is I think there needs to be more knowledge out there. Because couples are seriously lacking knowledge. They might have secular knowledge. But in terms of rights of each other's rights and responsibilities, Islamically, I think they're seriously lacking. And in regards to character as well, refinement of the character, people need to be working towards that as well to become better people.
The more we go back to the basic teachings of Ahl Sunnah and our guidelines, the better it will be for future generations, marriages, progression.
And I think this is why attachment to scholars is really important, because they're the ones that will remind you again and again of your responsibilities. When you're having problems, you remember this, because sometimes you just tend to forget in the busyness of life.
I think that's quite interesting, because I was speaking to somebody and they were saying, I think there is a lack of attachment to scholars, as you mentioned, because sometimes there are I think the other thing is, it's not just any old scholar as well. Sometimes you need scholars with wisdom, with hikmah, basically, with experience as well. Someone who's going to give you advice to you specifically, not sort of generically kind of thing. That's what we.
I was thinking about that when you was talking about people going for counselling. Because not all advice will suit everybody. Some people have a unique relationship that only the husband or wife are going to understand. It doesn't matter how much people are exposed to it; they ain't going to get it.
Or even if you go to a scholar who's not married. A scholar who's quite young, he's not married, and you go into with your marriage problems. He's not going to be very effective.
That's something is quite interesting.
He needs to have experience in that.
And I think a lot of people today, they don't want domestic stress, because I might talk to you, you might talk to me, but you don't know what's happening in your house for me to tell you X thing, or vice versa.
The other thing, what I've been told, what's it called? Is expectation as well, kind of thing.
Expectation.
In terms of,
expectation versus reality.
I mean,
I think that's a big problem, because people's expectations are just like sky high, because they're looking for perfection, which doesn't exist, and they're not willing to compromise. And that again leads to
but that's usually my experience is usually early on in marriage. So for the first 6 months to a year, maybe a little bit longer, the expectations are high, and then reality sets in, and that's when people
make it
start.
sound very depressing.
Sorry,
but it depends how much it's been blown up, doesn't it? If it's been blown up a lot, then the bubble pops. All you're gonna hear is that hissing sound.
But sometimes it's
the thing is, when you have that kind of wedding, you spend like £50,000 on the wedding.
Exactly.
The expectation like up there, and when you get that that downer, you're gonna have to
now they've done studies where there's a direct relation between the more you spend on a wedding, the higher the risk of you having a divorce. They've actually done that now. They've proven it through kind of research and things.
I think a lot of brothers going to be happy with listening to that one.
Which means that people are concentrating more on the weddings than the marriages.
No, I think the razzmatazz that comes with wedding, I think sometimes is ridiculous. I think
it's just over the top.
I think the other thing as well, with expectation, I think sometimes the underestimation as well. Sometimes, from what I've seen between, I've come across people. They are mashallah, they are beautiful character, they're really nice people. But sometimes, their spouses don't realize what they have, basically. They underestimate what they have. So, one is having that higher expectation, the other is undermining, looking, not realizing what you have as well. Because there are people who will stick with you thick and thin and could tolerate a lot of things, but then you have others who will not tolerate anything, and it's worth remembering that. I think we're coming to the end of our show. I think we've been having I would say a very enlightened discussion. I think, and hopefully to our listeners out there,
hopefully it benefits somebody.
Those who are married, I think hopefully it's something for you to ponder about, and those who are planning on getting married is something for you to plan, think about.
And brothers, cook a meal for your wife. It's not difficult, and she will love it.
I think what I would like to hear is next week's show, the next live show we do, right? If you get messages or think it right on 07885599786, brothers who cooked a meal for their wife, you want a full description. We'll take your honesty as on face value. I think there will be a prize for them.
Inshallah, that'll be good.
Do you think that is that a good incentive?
Yeah, why not? Just encourage people a little bit.
Yeah,
it doesn't hurt.
And it has to be a cooked meal as well. Not down a pizza.
Yeah, pick the phone up and you've dialed it.
So
definitely.
Yeah. Or if sisters want to phone in and say their husband made them something, then we'll think of a prize anyway. We'll try and find a prize. So whoever comes up with the best effort or meal, I think that's something. Okay, so remind me next week. You could go on the Facebook and I think on the Real Talk link or something like that. I think for today's show, which is 28th of April, put your comments and thoughts, okay, and we'll look into that as well.
Yeah, can I just mention quickly one thing? I've got a Facebook site called Nurturing Muslim Marriage. It's just a small one, but it's got a lot of resources on there. And, any events that are coming up on marriage, things like that. So it's
what's that again?
Nurturing Muslim Marriage.
Nurturing. So yeah, I know. But sorry, I forgot to mention that because I think you mentioned me last time as well. Yeah. And sorry about that. Yeah. I know, but the Shabir, mashallah, is involved in. I think the social worker from your background in terms of your background, and I know you do a lot of online activity in terms of disseminating information and. Advice and stuff like that, which is much needed. So I think it's definitely worth going into, and especially those who are newly married, planning on getting married, and even if you've been married for 50 years, 70 years, like that old man, he had the issue where he didn't realize it was just a bunch of flowers would reignite the that love and the compassion. So we have come to the end of the show. I think just want to sort of quickly mention a hadith. I mean, actually it's well, actually is a hadith that's worth pondering about if I could find it. This is something that Imam Zayd Shakir mentioned. The 7 secrets of happy marriage. It says, and it's called Hadith of Rahmah, which most people have heard of. It says, Allah will show mercy to the merciful people. Be merciful to those on the earth, and Allah will be merciful to you. I think this is Bukhari or Muslim hadith. I can't remember which one, but it's a famous hadith. It's called Hadith of Rahmah. So Allah will show mercy to the merciful people. Be merciful to those on earth, and Allah will be merciful to you. And the Shia mentioned that the hadith should apply. You should apply to your spouse first and foremost, basically. So in terms of how we treat our spouse should be with mercy and compassion. Inshallah, jazakallah to our guest, and we'll be back next Friday, inshallah. Thank you all.
Jazakallah.
Allah.
online at www.imanfm.com and on our app. You're listening to Iman FM.
इंसानी जिंदगियों को जुल्मत के अंधेरों से निकालकर रोशनी की मिराज पर ले जाने का जरिया ये औलिया कराम हैं इन्हीं औलिया कराम के हालात व वाक़यात पे मबनी प्रोग्राम अल्लाह के सफीर शाहिद शबीर चौधरी के साथ हर बुध की दोपहर 2 बजे सिर्फ रेडियो ईमान 103.1 FM पर
In the city of Sheffield, if you ever have an accident, do not fear. Mr. Compensator is here. He can provide you with a taxi, prestige, or 4x4 replacement vehicle in just 2 hours. Call 0114-3863-386 or visit mrcompensator.co.uk and let the experts manage your claim.
Iman FM. Ramadan is on its way and Iman FM is here. Iman FM, the time to promote your business